call it that. A big stuff happening in Washington, D.C. today. It was a first for Congress and Japan. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe walking onto the congressional floor addressing a joint session of Congress earlier today. He was there to rally support for what's being called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That would open trade between the U.S. and 12 Pacific nations. Now, Prime Minister Abe has President Obama's support on this, but not a lot of Democrats, because many of them in Congress think the pact will be a jobs killer. So it's interesting. The president is in a weird position. He's depending on Republicans to get this passed. What will need to take place for Congress to give the go-ahead overall? Bob Hormats, former Undersecretary of State for Economic Growth, Energy and the Environment, joins us in a Fox Business exclusive. You are the man we need to hear from on this. Should we like this Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership? Is there anything wrong with it?
Well, it's still not complete, of course. They still have to negotiate the final details. But if it moves in the direction that it is moving now, it'll be very positive for the United States in many ways. And that is, we need exports in order to create new jobs and strengthen innovative new companies. That's where we're going to get growth in our economy, and that's where we're going to get growth in employment. And many countries in Asia have impediments that we need to deal with. Intellectual property protection issues, questions of transparency in the way they structure their regulations, workplace standards that in some cases are deficient and need to be improved, environmental standards. If we can create a level playing field and greater confidence for American companies to be able to expand opportunities abroad, it will create jobs at home. The danger to jobs at home is very, very low, because with half of these countries, we already have free trade agreements. Their goods come in free of duty in any case.
Anyway,
we stand to benefit quite substantially. Now, I think the president's right. We want to be able to export more cars. We want to be able to export more agricultural products. All those things are important, but we need to do this in a negotiation where other countries open up their markets.
Well, specifically Japan, Bob. Japan has barriers to the United States really getting a toehold into the auto market, because they've got huge auto companies. Toyota, of course, among them, very important name there. And I suppose when I look at this, I remember the 90s when Japan was dumping very cheap steel here in the United States. So it's sort of a fool me once, shame on them. Fool me twice, shame on me. We don't want to be burned by this again, and yet we do want free trade. It's the best thing, open trade, is it not?
I think it is the best thing for us and for virtually every other country. The key point is that I do believe the Japanese want to make a deal, and Prime Minister Abe has been moving ahead, along with great support from the business community and many other factions in Japan, to have a deal here, and they are willing to make concessions to further open their markets. The fact is, however, they don't want to put a final deal on the table until the United States has what we call fast track, or TPA. They don't want to have their best deal put on the table, and then the U.S. says, oh, well, we're going to have to go back to the Congress. The Congress will change this point or that point or the other point, and then the Japanese government looks embarrassed back home because it's put its best deal, and the U.S. government continues to up the ante. The goal is to get a really good deal from Japan, have them open up, but they're not going to put their best deal on the table until they're sure that we have fast-track authority.
Yes, of course. And in the end, the resistance right now is coming mostly from the Democratic side, so that has to be overcome. It'll take several months. Bob, we need to ask you about Iran. Yesterday, Iranian ships in the Persian Gulf fired shots and took over a commercial ship. And right now, it's a very tense situation. We have a U.S. destroyer there. You, as former Undersecretary of State, have got to have an opinion on this. It is extremely worrisome, and it feels almost like the tension is way more than that. The Iranians look like pirates. They've taken the ship itself.
Well, this is really one of the problems that the United States has in its negotiations with Iran. One question is, who's calling the shots? There are different factions in Iran. Some of them want an agreement on the nuclear issue. Some of them probably would just soon not have an agreement on nuclear, and therefore they would be more inclined to exercise their muscles, their naval muscles, and do things of the kind they've been doing. But this demonstrates also that I think it's important to try to get a good nuclear deal. But I think it's also important that we not look at this in a Pollyannish way. We still have very, very serious differences with Iran on Yemen and many other parts of the world. They support Hezbollah, for instance. There are a lot of things they do that are very detrimental to regional interests and to American interests. So the question is, can we reach a good deal on the nuclear side, but also continue to put pressure on them on these other regional issues
Absolutely.
where they're doing things that are very damaging. And we have to demonstrate with our friends, the Saudis and the Israelis and other countries in the region, that we're still staunch allies in combating whatever Iran is trying to do to stir up trouble in the region. And overthrowing and undermining Yemen, which they have done, is very harmful to our interests. It allows terrorists to use Yemen as a base. It hurts our friends, the Saudis, and other countries in the region.
I couldn't say it any better. That's true. This Iran nuclear deal is not in and of itself a separate issue. You've got to weave it in with all the other tensions. Bob, thank you very much.
I think we can get an Iran deal on nuclear, but I think we also have to focus on thwarting the Iranian objectives in other parts of the region. That's going to be a very tough effort on the part of the United States.
Bob, good to see you. Thank you. Bob Hormats.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Liz.
Anytime. Vice Chairman of Kissinger Associates, former Undersecretary of State, former Goldman Sachs guy. We appreciate his opinion. Closing